It has been amazing here, and when you look at the map and you see where everyone came from to come to this conference, it has been truly amazing, and the speakers have been inspiring and inspirational. And I actually have met patients who I took care of 25, 30 years ago at this conference, and they now have children. And I don't think there's anything better than to have had type 1 and have healthy children. It's just phenomenal. So it's been fun seeing their pictures. I'm just going to go through this real quick. This is the 670G system. It has a sensor, which is this new sensor that they've come out with, which is better accuracy. It talks to the pump. The pump has the algorithm on it. It's a basal rate modulator, so it controls your basal rate for you. So you don't program a basal rate into this pump when it's in the auto mode. And this is the meter, which talks to the pump. This is when it's in open loop, and I'll show you some pictures of it in closed loop. So the sensor accuracy, this garden sensor is much better than previous Medtronic sensors, and that's made a big difference. With 2 finger sticks, it's about a 10% error, and if you do 4, it goes down to about 9.5% error. It has this little system that's working in the background, which is checking the sensor accuracy, and it will periodically, if it looks like it's not working well, ask you to put in a calibration value to make sure it's okay, because this is a system where whatever that sensor says is delivering insulin. So you want to make sure that sensor is accurate. So the sensor is calibrated by a finger stick. So the first studies we did with this were actually at a diabetes camp in Southern California here in 2014. And, but one of the things we wanted to do was look at getting the finger stick calibration. So I did this with my hand. I put a little milk on my finger, and the glucose went to 310. Jam, it went to 361. And pancake syrup, 526. If you go around camp after breakfast, everyone smells of pancake syrup. It's just the way it is. And so another group in Norway did this study where they had people cut an apple or peel a banana and then do a finger stick. And their blood sugars went from 150 were 270 after they didn't wash their hands an hour later. But if they washed their hands, it went down to 151. Or if they used a second drop of blood, it went down to 160. And just to show you the accuracy, this is in millimoles. So 30 here is roughly a 600. So the actual glucose is down here in the hundreds, and it would actually read about 600. And then if they used a second drop of blood, the accuracy became in this straight line. And this is just a take-home message for all of you who do calibrate. Even with the Dexcom, you need 2 calibrations a day, and you should do that after washing your hands. And anyone that's gone out here and had lunch and then is going to do a finger stick, second drop of blood. So at this first study, this is the pump, and it's in closed loop. It shows a 57. We were out playing soccer. This girl said she was feeling low. She got an alarm, and so we brought her over and checked her meter. And her meter actually read 57, so the blood sugars corresponded exactly, which was really nice to see. But you'll see she had a gauze pen, and she did the second drop of blood. So when we took this to camp, we had a shadow around each kid, and whenever they did a blood test, we'd make sure they used a second drop of blood or wash their hands. And when, like Ed's done studies and gone to camp and taken a sensor, when we've done previous studies and gone to camp, the sensor accuracy went from about 10, 11% to about 18, 19% error. And when we had them, we watched them and make sure they did it right, the error was only about 12%. So that makes a huge difference. And you certainly don't want to calibrate and get a high glucose, because then you're going to get a lot of insulin delivered to you. So this is important until they get a factory calibration. So the 670G is a basal rate modulator. It's not going to handle meals. It works extremely well overnight. So I live in Silicon Valley. I have parents with kids that were diagnosed when they were 2, 3 years of age, and they have hired someone to watch their kids 5 nights a week when they have to go to work. And they were doing finger sticks, and then the Dexcom came out, and then they would check their Dexcom overnight. Then they got shared. These people were still hired to watch the Dexcom overnight to make sure their kids didn't have lows overnight. 2 of these people went on our 670G study. We have kids on it now for 2 years, who've been on it for 2 years. And those night babysitters were all fired. It's not good for the economy, I know that. And Trump would be mad, but that's the way it is. But the thing really does protect you from getting lows at night and really brings you in with a good glucose. But you have all the work during the day. You have to check before meals, you got to bolus before meals, and you need to respond to alarms, and there are more alarms. This is just a nighttime, and I just want to show you the target here is 120, and this is a flat glucose, but this is a basal rate by the controller, and it's going on and off and up and down, and all these closed-loop systems, you don't see a flat basal rate. There are no flat basal rates. There are fluctuations, and it can vary by several 100% from one night to the next night and from one time of the night to the next night. And this provides a flat glucose. You can tune this. You can tune the carb-to-insulin ratios, the duration of insulin action, and the bolus speed. So you can give a bolus in 4 seconds, which is fast, or in 40 seconds, which is the standard bolus. And that can really bring the insulin on quicker. So that's a nice feature. The correction factor is in the pump. You put it in, and it's calculated for you, and you can't calculate that. The controller adapts. It has a target of 120, and if you want to go driving or some exercise, you can set it to 150. And I had a couple kids that can do that when they're playing soccer, and they say it works really well. How active it is and how strong it is based upon how much insulin you've gotten each day on the total daily dose and how good your glucose values have been overnight. And so it adapts on a daily basis with a fading memory. This is an example of one of our adolescents who's been in this was when she'd been in the study about 1.5 years. And you can see she can go to bed with the blood sugars over 200, 180, and it comes down. It's pretty nice control in the morning, and then she begins to do her things, field hockey, soccer, ice hockey, and you can see the blood sugars fluctuate. They take it on and off, they forget the bolus for a little snack, the usual things, because as we know, adolescents aren't really human beings. And this is the results of the study, and I just want to point out that the people coming into this study, the adolescents had an A1C of 7.7. You just saw from the previous data, the average for adolescents is 9. So these were fairly well-controlled adolescents coming in, and the adults had an average A1C of 7.3. This is the data. The gray is what their sensor tracing looked like for a week before they entered the study, and this is at the end of the study. And you cut down the variability. You bring the blood sugar into pretty nice control in the morning, and then you have some variability that happens during the day, but few lows. And just the statistics, the A1C dropped about 0.5%. The percent low was cut in half, and the time in range went above 70%. And our goal today is to keep the percent in range above 70%. This, I just want to show you who's a good candidate. So here is the initial A1C when they came in. So you had people coming in with an A1C of 9.5, 9, and they dropped their A1C by 2%. So they ended up with A1Cs of 7, coming in with a 9. People who had a very good A1C of 5.5, 6 didn't really see that much improvement. You can't do much better than that. So what I was encouraged by, people want to say, well, you shouldn't be in a study until you get your glucose into control. Well, that's sort of crazy. I think you always want to offer it to people. And no one can control their nighttime. You just can't be awake all night. The brain needs sleep. And that's what this does. So it greatly improves overnight control. You start the day with a good glucose. The sensor accuracy is much better. You still need to optimize the meal carb-to-insulin ratio. And we did a lot of that when we first started people. You need to understand what gets you out of the closed loop, and it's basically missing meal boluses and not calibrating every 12 hours. And every time I come to the clinic, there's someone that just forgets to bolus. So that's still an issue. And I just want to say there have been 25,000 of these pumps sold, so some of you must be on a waiting list in this room. Okay. And I got an email last night that they're shipping 14 to our clinic next week, and I don't know how we're going to train everyone in this period of time. So there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of things and nuances to know. People that are used to basal rates, this is different. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here today. And I'm really honored to follow Bruce. When we started the Artificial Pancreas Project, Aaron and I back at JDRF in 2005, Bruce was one of the handful of people that were interested in research in devices. It was a very small group. I think a meeting, I met Bruce in a small room. Without him, there would be no artificial pancreas, so thank you for your many years of leadership in this space. So we don't really use the term artificial pancreas at Bigfoot because it implies a bunch of things people assume about the technology that it really isn't. We prefer automated insulin delivery. But that's just a small part of what I'm going to talk about. Artificial pancreas or automated insulin delivery is a solved problem. That kind of sounds silly because we can't get one, most people. But in 2007, we funded research that proved that closing the loop between a sensor and a pump, and the sensors weren't nearly as good back then, was better than what people were doing for themselves. We then went on and did a bunch of other trials using various pumps and sensors around the world and really showed that that was safer, convinced the FDA. This is actually a solved problem by people with type 1 diabetes, too. 4 years ago, my co-founder, Brian Maslish, actually hacked into a pump and a sensor and created the world's first ambulatory real-world artificial pancreas system that his wife and son have been continuously using for now over 4 years. It's transformed their lives. And now hundreds of people around the world have done that for themselves and copied that formula. So this is a solved problem from a technology perspective. What's really not solved is how to build a solution that everybody can use and that is going to get reimbursed and prescribed by doctors. And this is the challenge that Bigfoot has undertaken. So when we talk about what we're doing, we're taking, I think, a somewhat different approach. We're focusing on the person who uses the technologies. It's one thing for what the doctor thinks the person needs. It's one thing for what the parents, and I was one of those diabetes police, I confess, when my son was in the home. I now realize that. But the person with the disease is the one that's important because they're the ones using the tools, and if the tools don't work for them, they just don't work. Full stop. So we start with them, and we say, what works for them? Well, in order to do that, you need to have some innovation, not just in the technology. You also have to have an innovation in the business model for delivering the technology. Both of these things are challenged today. And let me tell you a little bit of what I mean. Well, if it's not reimbursed, it's not going anywhere. It needs to be reimbursed. And we need to make that as a company easy for you. The doctor shouldn't be fighting the battle. The patient shouldn't be convincing the insurance company. It's the company's job to go to the payer and say, this works, it saves you money, the patient does better, and you're going to reimburse it. We, as a company, need to take that battle off your hands. We also have to make it easier for the doctors to prescribe it. A scary fact is that most people with type 1 diabetes are actually treated by primary care providers, not endocrinologists, 66%. So the ability of those doctors to prescribe today's insulin pumps and sensors and configure and interpret data and go back and forth to support the usage of complex devices, it's just not there. In fact, endocrinologists don't have time to do it either. It needs to be easier, and that's the company that needs to do that. It needs to take all the wonderful technologies that we have today and wrap them up so that it is more usable. Needs to do it like Apple would do it. And then at the end of the day, it is all designed for the patient. But you have to solve these customer problems across these different classes. It has to make sense for the payer, it has to work for the doctor, and it has to work for the person. That's why these businesses are hard to build, because you have 3 different customers and they all need different things. But what we think they all need is they need a singular solution. They don't need 10 prescriptions that the doctor has to write for pumps and reservoirs and sensors and transmitters and receivers and blood glucose monitors and test strips and down to the Lancet, which you throw out anyway. That doesn't serve anybody's interest. It's burdensome for the doctor to have to worry about all that stuff being reimbursed and just writing the prescriptions, wasting 15 minutes of time of the most precious resource in medicine. It's crazy. And then as patients, you have to run around and go to the pharmacy and the company and the mail order pharmacy, and then you got to do inventory management in your kitchen, and then you throw out after 3 months all the stuff that's expired. That's crazy too. And then it's also crazy because the payers are paying for all that, and they know a lot of the stuff's being thrown out that isn't being used. It's crazy for everybody but us medical device companies. We're going to solve that. That's the business model innovation. It's one prescription, and we provide you all that stuff that you need for that one prescription and one copay. You talk about making it easier. Artificial pancreas is a part of that, and auto configuration of pumps and algorithms and machine learning, that's all great. But just give me the stuff I need to use the darn thing, and make it easy to do so and cost effective to do so. That's part of the innovation that we need to bring. So for Bigfoot, it's not going to be buying a pump that you have to wait 4 years to upgrade. You're going to be paying for a service, or your insurance company will, and your copay will be for that. Every month, you're going to have the latest hardware, the latest software, all the pieces you need to use it. That's the way the rest of our lives work. I don't understand why it can't be the case in medical device. So we're going to have a bit of a collection, an ecosystem of our own here, and it's for people on shots, just like it is for people on pumps, because not everybody's going to wear a pump. And maybe people want to switch back and forth. How would that be? Maybe sometimes you want to wear a pump, and other times when you're on a beach vacation, you're going to inject yourself with insulin. I used to go to the beach with my son and chase him around to try and put the infusion set back on to get some insulin into him. Wash off 3 infusion sets in the stand. You know, it's crazy, right? Why weren't we on shots? Because it's hard to switch back and forth. It's just another thing you got to think about, you got to plan for. When do I put the pump back on? When does the Lantus run out? With us, you go on shots, you put the pump back on. The pump will start when the Lantus runs out, because I know that in software. That's what technology can do. And so when we talk about smart technology, let's take technology and solve some very practical problems, like the transition between shots and infusion. I don't have to be a pump person. I don't have to be a shots person. I can be both. Why can't I be both? The technology should fit around the person. We make some of these components on the insulin infusion side. We're going to partner for the glucose side and deliver something that uses this supercomputer we carry around in our pockets all day, the phone. And not a phone that's sent to you by Bigfoot, but the one you buy at the Apple store. And it's going to be an interface to a chronic disease management system, and it's going to be much easier to use. It is a way that focuses the technology to support how people live, not making them contort themselves around how the technology works. It's a consumer approach, because we're focused on the patient. This is a hard company to build. It requires a lot of competencies. You have to know consumers and industrial design and interface design. You have to know about data science and machine learning and all that stuff we know about in Silicon Valley. But then you also have to know about stuff that medical device companies know about and have been doing for many years in terms of Class 3 medical devices, dealing with the FDA, doing clinical trials, auditing suppliers who provide parts to the system that you make, that the FDA regulates. All that's very expensive and complicated and requires a lot of talent. I think Bigfoot is probably the smallest company that you could possibly imagine, 50 people now, that could do all this stuff under one roof. This is the reason this hasn't been solved before, because these are very hard businesses to build and capitalize, but I'm proud to say that we have assembled a team, recently reached 50 people. 40% of them actually are touched by type 1 diabetes. I think about a dozen of them have it. A bunch of people have kids with it, including the 4 founders, wives, husbands. It's a team that knows what problem we're solving, and I think that gives us a real advantage in terms of how we're going to move forward. So I'm up here to talk about artificial pancreas, but really what Bigfoot's goal is to make life easier and safer. That's what we're trying to do, and happy to have an opportunity to talk to you about it today. Thank you for your time.
Okay, so I'm already thinking of questions I want to ask Bruce and Jeff when we have the time, and I think we will run a little bit into lunch because I want to make sure everyone has time to get some questions answered. But next, we're going to turn it to Jake, who works at Dexcom. And I mentioned he's head of research and development, just to hear what Dexcom is doing or the part they're playing in all of this. So Jake, come on up. We'll hear from you. Thanks.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. My name is Jake Leach. I lead the research and development team at Dexcom, and it's wonderful to see everybody here in San Diego. San Diego is actually the home base of Dexcom. It was just about 10 miles from here where we developed our very first glucose sensor, and it's today where we manufacture the bulk of all Dexcom products, just 10 miles away. The focus of Dexcom is to develop the most reliable, the most accurate, and the most easy to use continuous glucose sensors possible. And if you think about it, a reliable glucose sensor is one of the most important parts of a closed loop system because it's determining how to control that blood sugar. Well, it needs to know accurately what that sugar is, and so that's why Dexcom's proud to be partnered with a number of companies working on glucose. In fact, the Dexcom G5 system, our current system, is the only system that the FDA has ever approved for making diabetes treatment decisions. And what that means is that users of G5 can make decisions like how many carbs to take, how much insulin to deliver, based off their CGM, and they're not required to take a finger stick to double check the readings. It's the only CGM that's accurate enough for that. And it's making it the perfect companion for a closed loop system, the perfect sensor to hook up to an artificial pancreas. We're proud to be partnered with companies like Tandem, Bigfoot, Biomedical, Beta Bionics, our partners at Insulet, Tandem, Animas. We are all working together to develop artificial pancreases. Now let's take a look at some of the future CGM systems that we are working on. The G6. It's in development. It's the next generation of Dexcom product. It's a new glucose sensor that has a 10-day duration of use instead of 7 days like G5. It has acetaminophen blocking, and what that means is when you take Tylenol, you no longer have to worry about the accuracy of your readings. And it has a new algorithm for calibration. It only requires 1 calibration per day. It also comes with a new wearable that has a new adhesive patch and a 30% smaller transmitter. And finally, it also comes with a new applicator device. So this is the device that applies the sensor to the skin. Yes, the injector. Our goal with G6 is to maintain that level of performance that we've achieved with G5 and continue to make the product more convenient. Less calibrations, longer duration sensor. Let's take a look at how this applicator works. You peel off the adhesive, you put the applicator on the body, and you just press a button. And when you press that button, the needle's inserted, the sensor's dropped off, and the needle's removed. All happens in 15 milliseconds. Quite a bit simpler than the injector. You attach the transmitter, and you're off and running. It communicates with both iPhone and Android. All readings are there on the iPhone, smartphone. Readings can be shared with Share. We're just wrapping up the clinical trials for this product. We're very excited. We hope to launch it next year. The last thing I want to talk about is where CGM is going in the future. So Dexcom, a few years ago, partnered with Google's life sciences division called Verily. And what our goal is to develop a CGM system that's the size of a penny. Sensor, transmitter, the whole wearable the size of a penny. And so when people think about Google, they think the search engine that we all use to search the internet, but they also make significant investments in technology, driverless cars, and even medical devices. So together with this team, we're searching for the most accurate, most reliable, smallest CGM system ever, which is the perfect future system for those advanced artificial pancreases. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Jake. I see that auto injector, and the first thing I'm thinking about is all the new places I can stick my CGM now. I know Dexcom doesn't want to hear that. I was supposed to put it on his stomach, but believe me, it's going other places. But anyways, I wanted to throw it over to John now from Tandem, and I mentioned he's the COO, and he's going to tell us about Tandem, makers of the T-Slim pump, what they're up to in terms of AP. Thanks, John.
Thanks. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to San Diego. Like Jake, our headquarters are just about 20 miles up the road as well. In fact, we're very close to the Dexcom facility, and we work very closely with Dexcom. When you think of innovation at Tandem, I think that the most apparent thing is the easy to use, the intuitive user interface that we've got. The other thing it's also the smallest pump on the market. We have the only device in the market that has a rechargeable battery, and the capacitive touchscreen is also very important. One of the things that we're really excited about right now, and we've been working on for a couple of years, is the Tandem Device Updater. The Device Updater is a tool that you use in your everyday life today. Everybody here has a smartphone. The smartphone allows you to update the software on the smartphone for either bug fixes or for new features. And so Tandem has recently got FDA approval for the updater, and that's going to allow us to update the software on your pumps in the field remotely. And what this does is basically, if you have a T-Slim pump, a T-Slim X2 pump, you now have access to our new product pipeline. Everything that we develop, every new technology that we have, when it's available and approved by the FDA, we can provide it to you real time. So you no longer have to wait 4 years. You no longer have to pay exorbitant amount of money to basically have a new technology put on your pump. As soon as our device is approved, as soon as it's available, we'll make it available to you. Now, it's a very simple process. We basically send you an email. If you have a T-Slim X2 pump, we send you an email. The email basically lets you know you have access, or you're basically eligible to be upgraded. It walks you, if you decide to upload at this point in time, you just plug the pump into your computer. It launches an app. It takes you to a website. The first thing that happens is it goes through some safety checks with you, and then it begins the upgrade process. It takes about 6 minutes. When it's done, it lets you know that the software has been installed successfully. Actually, we had Adam Brown at our facilities about a week or two ago when we demonstrated this for him, and his quote was, "I'm blown away." It's very simple, it's very easy to use, and I think it's what you expect today with updatability when it comes to the devices that you're just used to using. So the reason, again, it's important is that we have a number of products that we're going to be releasing to the marketplace here in the next 18 months. And with this updater, you haven't got to wait. You haven't got to wait 4 years. As soon as these new products are available, they'll be delivered to you. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the T-Slim X2 integration with the Dexcom G5 sensor. As Jake just pointed out, the G5 sensor is clearly the best sensor on the marketplace. It's got the best, it's got the non-adjunctive use. It has the highest accuracy. And so it's a very important part of our automated insulin delivery program, and this is really the starting point for it. So we're under review right now by the FDA. We expect that the device will be approved here in the summer time frame. And as soon as it's approved, it'll probably take us about 30 days to formally launch the product. But even before that, what we're going to do is for everyone who has a T-Slim X2 pump today, they'll get an email and they'll have an opportunity to upgrade the pump with the capability to use the G5 sensor in a very short period of time. The next project that we're working on is the Predictive Low Glucose Suspend. This is a T-Slim X2 pump with a G5 sensor, and it's an algorithm that's been developed by a number of clinical key opinion leaders. The algorithm has been proven to significantly reduce the incidence of hypoglycemia, specifically nocturnal hypoglycemia. It's a very simple to use algorithm, very simple to understand. At a very high level, basically the way it works is the algorithm is looking out 30 minutes in time, and if it sees your BG levels or predicts that your BG levels are going to drop below 80, it just suspends insulin. It waits until the BG levels begin to go back up again, and as soon as they do, it resumes insulin. There's a few other things that happen to it, but that's how simple it is. And again, there's a substantial reduction in nocturnal hypoglycemia because of this. So we had a feasibility study that we ran last fall. It was very successful. We were very pleased with the results. In fact, Dr. Florenza from the Barbara Davis Center in Colorado, he presented the results at the ADA just a few weeks ago. We're actually working with Dr. Buckingham and Dr. Pettis here on our pivotal trial. Our pivotal trial process has started. We expect to begin enrolling patients in this study here in the summer time frame, and actually probably next month. We're also working with Yale, we're working with the Barbara Davis Center, and we're working with UC Santa Barbara on the clinical trial. We expect the trial to be done in the fall time frame, and when it's done, we'll immediately turn it around and get the information into the FDA, and we expect that this device will be on the marketplace in the early 2018 time frame. Now, as I said, this is going to be, you're going to be able to get this technology as soon as it's available. We'll release it formally, but if you have a t:slim X2 pump, we'll use the updater to make it available to all those people almost as soon as it's released. And then the last product I'm going to talk about is our hybrid closed loop system. This is a collaboration, again, between Dexcom and Type 0. Jake just talked about the advantages of the G6 sensor, which is the device that will be used on this product. We chose Type 0 because they have a significant amount of clinical data. They've been involved in about 35 clinical studies with about 300,000 hours of clinical data. And if you look at the clinical results, they're very impressive. The time in range is substantially improved, and the incidence of hypoglycemia is substantially reduced. So we are, and I think the other thing that's really important about this device is that we have really spent a lot of time on the user interface. We want to make this easy to use and easy to understand so that people aren't confused when they're using a device. I think that it's clear that when you add these algorithms to these pumps, the system becomes more complex. And I think it's very important at that point that the user interface remains simple and intuitive for the device to be effective. So we've really spent quite a bit of time on that. Now we're participating right now in the International Diabetes Closed Loop Trial. This trial is underway. In the fall time frame, there's a second phase of that trial that's going to be initiated. We're going to have our hybrid closed loop system in that trial. The second phase is designed to be a pivotal study, and so we intend to use the data from this trial in a submission to the FDA as a pivotal study. So we intend to actually have this device on the market in the late 2018 timeframe. And I think that what I'll say that we have a track record of delivering technology and innovation to the marketplace. I think when you look at these three products and you look at the combined with the availability of the Tandem device updater, we're excited. We think that we're going to continue to build on the momentum we have and deliver innovation to the diabetes community. Thank you.
You know, I'll just add that we are going to be doing some of these Tandem studies and other studies here at UCSD. And tomorrow during the Cure panel, I'll have a link to a SurveyMonkey survey that you can enter your information if you're interested in participating in clinical trials. And we can reach out to you if you might qualify for some of these things. I think the last person we have is Ed Damiano. And all these tech guys got me their slides in different techie ways. So let me see if I can get over here to this. And Ed, come on up. I think you should just open the PDF like that.
Yeah, you can actually view it full screen.
Just hit this guy.
Yeah. No, full screen.
There you go. All right,
Good afternoon, everyone, or morning, I guess, still. I got to confess, I lost my glasses. First time in 28 years I've lost my glasses. So you guys are all sort of an aggregate, out-of-focus group. So I apologize for that, but there you have it. Thank you, Steve and Jeremy, for inviting me to present some of the work we've been doing. We've been not laying low. We've been a little bit quiet these past few months because we've really been putting our nose to the grindstone and getting a lot of work done building an integrated solution for diabetes management. We started a company about 1.5 years ago called Beta Bionics. It's a Massachusetts public benefit corporation and a certified B Corp. So we have a public benefit mission to serve the type 1 diabetes community, and we can do that and protect under Massachusetts Commonwealth law to the exclusion even of returning equity to shareholders. So we have a huge obligation to serving that public good. So it's a very different kind of company, and we're building a very different type of technology. It's a technology that's been integrated into a fully, a small portable handheld system. We call it the iLet, in homage to the islets of Langerhans. It's about the size of the original iPhone from 2007, from 10 years ago. It's a little bit thicker, but it's similar in size. But it does a very different thing. And we think we will get a system that will perform these glycemic control in a much more elegant way than anything we've tested before or seen out there. But it is the first bihormonal system that you can really put in your pocket. You know, the device we've been testing for the past 4 years or so has been a kludgy kind of cobbling together of an iPhone with a couple of tandem pumps, with a glucose sensor and receiver unit. And while that showed great clinical results, it was not a practical commercial product. And while I had never intended to go so far as to build a device like this, my intention was to take the algorithms and license them to some med tech company. The closer I got to that, the more I realized that wasn't going to work. And I think many people in this room who are doing similar things have come to the same conclusion, that the way the insulin pump market has evolved over the years doesn't lend itself to a paradigm-shifting mentality about glycemic control. And we think we have the right ingredients to do this and the right model to do it. But I want to first talk a little bit about the value proposition in the iLet. And I would just like the caveat to all this is that when I talk about the iLet, what I'm really talking about is the Bionic Pancreas technology we've been testing in clinical trials for almost 10 years now. And before that, in preclinical trials, going back to 2005, and before that, theoretical work on algorithms going back to 2002 and 2003. So we've been at this for a long time, and we've learned a great deal from each one of our clinical studies, first in the inpatient setting, and then in the outpatient setting, and then in the home use setting. And all of that knowledge and experience is being integrated into the iLet, into this little handheld wearable device. It's an autonomous, what we call bionic pancreas. We think it's a more descriptive term than artificial pancreas. It tells you what it is rather than what it isn't. And it's a system that automates glucose control depending on how you've configured it. It's an adaptable system. Not only does it adapt to your ever-changing insulin needs throughout the day and night, but it's also adaptable in the sense that you can configure it in different ways. And you can allow the device to accommodate your lifestyle. So you can use it in really one of 3 different ways: as a bihormonal system for people with type 1 diabetes, as an insulin-only system for people with type 1 diabetes and people with type 2 diabetes on injection therapy. We're hopeful that the system will work well in that population. We've also actually begun some clinical trials, preliminary studies looking at the performance of the system in type 2s who are on injection therapy. And also it's a glucagon-only system, because we have 2 hormones, so we can choose either one or both. And this is for people who don't have diabetes, but have chronic hypoglycemia. If ever there were a population of people in the world that could empathize with the challenges of people with chronic hypoglycemia, it's those who have type 1. Imagine being hypoglycemic all the time. This is a group of people, you know, chronic hyperinsulinism, like congenital hyperinsulinism, kids born secreting too much insulin, and they are hypoglycemic all the time. They have GI tubes put in to feed them sugar right into their gut. We're hopeful that this technology in a glucagon-only configuration can really be helpful to them. And then when they ultimately have their pancreases removed, they would go on a full bihormonal system. There are other populations, post-bariatric surgery patients also, some subset of them have hypoglycemia chronically. We think a glucagon-only system will be helpful there, and my clinical collaborator, Stephen Russell, has done some studies in that population to really good effect as well. So it's really 3 devices in one, and it's treating different kinds of glycemic dysregulation, from type 1 to type 2 to chronic hypoglycemia. And it's a system, though, that is also inherently intuitive. The actual user experience from the insulin-only configuration to the bihormonal configuration is essentially the same. It's the same device. You just close off the glucagon chamber, and the device automatically falls into an insulin-only configuration. You add glucagon in a pre-filled cartridge, and it will become a bihormonal system, and it'll change the way it doses insulin slightly and improve your control. So it's very simple to go between these different configurations, and it's something that is going to roll out that way. The glucagon indication that we're looking for will take longer to obtain than the bihormonal system, but we think the system should grow up with these automated insulin delivery systems into a true automated glycemic control system. So whereas we look at the insulin-only system as one that is automating insulin delivery, and the glucagon-only system is something that automates glucagon delivery, the bihormonal system is something that automates glycemia, blood glucose levels, because it can raise and lower blood sugars and allow people to be more spontaneous with their lives. They can be more physically active when and as much as they want, much more so, and with much greater ease than in the case of insulin-only systems. So we want to continue to evolve the technology, but we don't want to wait for a bihormonal system before we can bring this technology to people. And we see great results with our collaborators at MGH, Stephen Russell and Bruce Buckingham at Stanford, Dave Harlan at UMass, and John Buse at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. We've tested this system in home use studies. Some of these are in the insulin-only configuration, others in the bihormonal configuration, and others in the glucagon-only configuration. But the whole concept behind the Bionic Pancreas and the iLet is one that really is dedicated to changing the paradigm in diabetes management. We are embracing the idea that the device take over as much of the glucose control as is possible and practical. We want to essentially increase access of technology to patients and providers. And so we really think you need to do both, because as I think Jeffrey Brewer mentioned, a large percentage, the majority of people with type 1 diabetes are actually having their diabetes management taken care of by primary care physicians. And I feel like a lot of these conferences we're going to, as valuable as they are, we are in a bit of an echo chamber. We are not talking to the majority of people out there. And many people are on multiple daily injection therapy because they're seeing primary care physicians for their diabetes management. We've built a device that is truly a turnkey solution. And we've been able to test this in years of clinical trials to show that a system that is initialized only with your body weight, knowing nothing of your total daily dose of insulin, your carb to insulin ratios, your correction factors, or your basal rates, comes online, whether you're an adult, an adolescent, or a preteen. And it adapts to your ever-changing insulin needs. That's a technology that a primary care physician can prescribe. That's a technology that can be reached by many people with type 1 diabetes, and all the providers out there can prescribe a device that is initialized that easily, and that has and it's a technology that does not have all the follow-on care for the provider, or certainly for the patient, that other technologies that are built on top of insulin pump mentalities will still require. So we think this is a way we can improve access for patients, improve access for physicians who can then bring it to patients. So we really see that as something that is going to be extremely valuable to increasing access. And also, of course, providers are going to see better control, and technologies that are easier to use are going to be adopted, and the patients will continue to use them. So if the technology shows improved glycemic outcomes, and with greater ease of use, less burden, they will continue to use the technology. So there'll be an adherence to that, and providers will benefit from that improved care. And it doesn't matter if a technology improves your care if nobody wants to hook up to it. It's not going to save the providers any money. So we really see this as sort of this triumvirate we're trying to address. And Jeffrey Brewer's talking about the 3 customer segments. We see the same kinds of important dynamics and interconnectivity between those segments. So that is sort of the philosophy behind what we're trying to do, what we've been working on for about 15 years now. The pedestal underneath all this is our clinical data. And for all this to work, you have to be able to demonstrate that the system can work in all comers, as many different kinds of people as possible. And it's one thing to say that all algorithms are the same. It's another to point out how these things actually work. Deployment is different. Some algorithms may achieve similar glycemic control in a subset of the population, but need a great deal more effort to achieve that control. So we've used the same notion in all of our clinical trials, a system initialized only with body weight, not knowing whether you're a preteen or a teen or an adult, not knowing if you need 3 times more insulin than this person who has the same body mass. The device needs to be able to figure that out by itself and continuously update. So we've published our work on all of our outpatient home use studies over the past several years in various journals. The New England Journal of Medicine manuscript came out in 2014. We had a paper in the Lancet Diabetes Endocrinology showing results from our preteen studies, and then more recently in the Lancet in our home use study. And the results consistently show the same kind of performance. We see whether you're an adolescent, an adult, or a teen or a preteen, Average glucose levels in our bihormonal system of about 140 mg per deciliter, in our insulin-only system of about 150 to 155 mg per deciliter. In the bihormonal system, we see about hypoglycemia, glucose levels below 60 mg per deciliter, only 9 to 14 minutes a day on average in all of our populations, all 3 populations we've studied. 90% of adults, teenagers, and pre-adolescents with type 1 diabetes on our study would meet ADA goal for therapy with the bihormonal system. About 40 to 50% would meet goal for therapy on our insulin-only system. So we're seeing about twice as much hypo on the insulin-only system. As expected, you don't have the glucagon to rebound it, but it's still much better than usual care. And it's fully automated insulin delivery. It's not just taking a part of the problem. It's taking over the whole burden, where you'll still use carbohydrates to help protect against hypoglycemia to a much greater extent than the bihormonal system, but it's a great step along the way. It's an increment, but it's a big increment. And the use of the system, the way patients will interact with it will be very similar to the bihormonal system. And then finally, the glucagon-only system in some early studies we've done in post-bariatric surgery patients that Stephen Russell has done with our technology show a 4-fold reduction in patients with who are hypoglycemic unaware type 1 adults. 4-fold reduction with glucagon only. Our system was automatically delivering glucagon while they were controlling their insulin. And they didn't know whether they were getting glucagon or placebo over a 14-day period. Half the time they got automated glucagon delivery, half the time they were getting placebo. There was a 4-fold reduction in hypoglycemia just adding the glucagon, not changing their insulin dosing. There was a 19-fold reduction in hypoglycemia overnight in these patients when they were getting glucagon instead of placebo. They couldn't tell if they were getting glucagon or placebo. When they were asked at the end of each day which were they on, they got it wrong more than chance. So they really couldn't tell. And yet they were getting much better protection from hypoglycemia. Other ways of automating our system, we have a meal announcement feature. It allows you to interact with the device very minimally, but you interact with the device in a qualitative, relativistic way. You tell the device how many carbs you're having relative to what is typical for you, not whether it's 30 grams or 62 grams, because none of us really know that. Nobody's good at that. And even if you know, you shouldn't be good at that. And even if you know what those carbohydrates are, you don't necessarily know that the carbohydrate to insulin ratio that you've converged upon has really converged, or has it suddenly diverged. So the reality is that we don't think that a meal announcement feature needs to be quantitative. It ought to be qualitative. So it asks you how many carbs do you need relative to what is, how many carbs are you having typical for yourself, more or less than what is typical for yourself, and then you choose and let the device automatically clean up the mess, if you will, afterwards. So we found in our inpatient studies, when we actually quantified this in adolescents and adults, we only saw about a 13 mg per deciliter difference in mean glucose, whether you gave no meal announcements, fully automated insulin glucose control, or when you did give the meal announcements. And that would be about 0.5% in the A1C difference. So for the teenager that forgets to bolus, which I've witnessed personally many times, this device has got your back. It's going to give you the insulin replacement therapy you need. Whenever you use it, you'll benefit from it. And we've also found that in our outpatient study, we saw our most recent multi-center home use study, we found in adults that on average people meal announced 2 to 3 times a day, 2.6 times a day. A subset of that population, about 5 of those 39 subjects, meal announced only 1.6 times a day, between 1 and 2 times a day. There was no difference in their mean glucose in the home use setting or in hypoglycemia, whether they meal announced 2.5 times a day or 1.5 times a day. Still, it's a very low burden. The interaction just takes a few seconds, and it's non-quantitative. It's qualitative. Every aspect of this device is qualitative. It's diabetes without numbers. The device should take over the numbers part. So I just want to finish by emphasizing that technology has been it's been a long time in coming. I appreciate your patience with all of this. I was hoping to get this thing done before my kid goes to college. That's about 60 days away, and 22 miles. He's going to BU. So I failed to hit that target, but I'm just going to keep doubling down and trying to do as well as I can to build this team around this idea and get this out to him as soon as he can. I'm hoping that we can have the clinical trial for this, the insulin-only version of the system, done by the end of next year, and I'm hoping in about 24 months we can see approval of the insulin-only iLet. The bihormonal iLet, I'm hoping, is about 18 to 24 months after that. We just had wonderful news from our partner, Zealand Pharma, showing results of their stable pumpable glucagon analog, the first in the world, showing no difference in the performance of the glucagon analog versus the Lilly glucagon, rescue kit glucagon we've been using all these years in our Bionic Pancreas. In fact, if anything, it's slightly more effective. And that was in a Bionic Pancreas study that Stephen Russell did at MGH. So we're very encouraged about the progress that's going on. That glucagon has the same stability profile as the insulin analogs we use today. Several, 18 months in the supply line and many weeks in a pump. So I'm very encouraged about the progress in that partnership with Zealand as well. So just stay tuned, and we'll try and keep bringing this good news to you over the course of the next 24 to 48 months. Thanks very much.